And welcome to this week's edition of Red, Gold, and Bold. We hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving and enjoyed a bye week as the Kansas City Chiefs were off. Back at it as usual from the NFL Network and NFL.com. Jeff Chadiha is with us. Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. You can check out his great work. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. You can check me out via the stream at 810WHB.com. And guys, a lot to talk about with these Kansas City Chiefs. Let's start with where they are coming out of the bye week. Typically, Andy Reid owns the bye week. What do we expect from the Chiefs? What got fixed? Do we figure there's any lull or no? Is it off and running and we're going to see their best football, Jeff?
Well, as you said, you know that they're going to be prepared. He's pretty good coming out of a bye week. And I would assume the offense will be better. I would assume you'll see some tweaks, some new plays, some creativity that we have not seen in the last few weeks. You'll probably see a better way of attacking. Too high safety. I'm tired of saying too high safety. I've said it like every week, like everybody else in this town has in Kansas City. So I'm prepared to talk about something besides too deep coverage and quarters and everything else that falls into that category. But this is a great opportunity for them to reset and to take control. I think it's been a good bye week for them just because they woke up without having to worry about it being tied for first place in the AFC West. They're all by themselves. I think what you're seeing is a lot of teams all over the league going through their own struggles now. And so we'll talk about that later, what that means for this team. But overall, I think that I would be surprised if they come out flat against the Broncos. I think they've got new life. They've got a lot of things to play for now, and they control their own destiny. So they should be much improved this week.
Eric? What do you think? Is it time for them to rip off 6 more in a row, finish the year on a 10-game winning streak, or what?
I mean, no better time than now, right? I think, obviously, we had so many issues with them early in the season because there were a lot of problems, right? It wasn't just, hey, solve one thing, solve two things. I think I'm fairly confident that their defense will get them on the green, now. Like, I think that they got the right players on the field. I know we talked about this on your show today on 810, but there's a lot of good players on that defense now, and the group is better than the sum of the parts. To me, the one problem they have to solve is they have to play better offense. They have not really played good offense, save the Raiders game, for about 5-6 weeks. And, as a Chiefs fan, I think that that's comforting. That's, the Mahomes and Reid solving the offensive problem does seem to be the most acute thing, that could exist. And you look around the league and every other team has a multitude of problems. And, that's, obviously when you look at, I don't necessarily know if they'll rip off 6 in a row, but I don't think that that's the bar for them to even get the 1 seed, given all the struggles of the teams like the Titans and the Bills and so on and so forth, and the teams that New England has to face down the stretch. So I think they came out of the bye, as Jeff said. They didn't even have to do a lot of work, and things kind of laid in front of them pretty well.
Why is Andy Reid so good coming off the bye? Is this just, hey, all coaches? I mean, a lot gets made of him. Has he been a little bit lucky? If we looked it up, every good coach or great coach, whatever you want to call him, is actually very good off the bye because their record's already very good. So this is more just a little bit of a statistical anomaly, or for whatever reason, something's been hung around his head. Or is there something special in the batter that Andy Reid is cooking every year, Jeff?
Well, again, you raise a good point. I don't know what Bill Belichick is coming out of a bye, or Sean McVay, or Matt LaFleur now. I don't know what their records are. I would assume they're pretty good. But the thing about Andy that is that given time to look at something and to research something, he usually comes up with something pretty crafty, which is why, coming into the season, he's always pretty hot. Coming out of a bye, he's always pretty hot. With a playoff bye, he's always pretty hot because he loves to break down film. You go back to his days in Philadelphia, and they'll tell you that the things that he loved to do most was get into a room by himself and just think of plays and think of ways to improve his offense. And that's always been one of his staples. And I think it's a great thing to have when you have a young quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. I think, if anything, this season has taught us a lot about just as great as he's been, he's not immune to some of the things that all young quarterbacks have to go through, which are growing pains. And so I think Andy Reid, I think the first, whatever it's been now, 3.5 years now? He's 4 years as a starter, so 3.5 years as a starter. I think he was able to let Mahomes just go out there and be Mahomes. And now I think he's got to coach him a little bit more. He's got to do more things to make sure he gets him right. And he's also got to look at himself a little bit more in his offense and the way he's approached running this offense to see what works best going forward. I think the most encouraging sign I've seen about this team in the last couple of weeks is just that they are willing to play ugly. They are willing to take what defenses give them. And before, there was a lot more bravado and a lot more of this is who we are. Nobody stops us but ourselves, that kind of attitude. And now it's more like we have to go out there and do whatever it takes to win games and get the ball in the end zone, which means, again, I think you'll see a more mature, a more pragmatic approach to the offense by Andy moving forward.
Eric, anything in the analytics that you see as to why Andy Reid, or is this just become a creation and lazy media just has heard this for 10 years and so they keep pitching? I know he was something like he only had one loss, I think it was, in Philadelphia. He's picked up a couple in Kansas City. People are right to point out, like, hey, there's a bye week before they play Tampa in the Super Bowl. That's true. So is it just more hype, more fiction than reality?
No, I don't think so. I think, they did lose in 16, the playoffs, after having a 2 seed. That was the first time he got the bye in the Chiefs era. I do know that they lost to the New York Giants in 17 off of a bye. So, it's not perfect. I mean, part of these things are always like, I look at, statistics where it's like, oh, Tom Brady has the most fourth quarter comebacks or Tom Brady is the best fourth quarter passer and all that. Like anytime you slice down the data, it's usually just like, well, was this person good to begin with? Yes. Okay. Well, then there's a good chance he's going to be like outlier good in some small sample. And so the idea is like, well, was Andy Reid a great coach? Yeah. Okay. Well, then he's probably going to win a lot of games off of a bye too. And that's probably all it is. I mean, I think Reid, to me, if this narrative's true, you're going to see a Chiefs offense blow torch the NFL for the second half of the year, because to me, the film that they have to watch is their own on offense, because I think that they're leaving a lot on the table as far as what they could be, just from the standpoint of how they're running that thing and how the league is adjusted to them. And that's why, we're so excited that they have the late bye, right? Because not only they go into that thing healthy relatively, right? There are some nagging injuries on the team. So it's not even so much that they're getting a lot of guys healthy. It's that they're getting a lot of guys healthy and they get to sort of shore up something that's been a strength forever and a weakness this year.
Yeah, no doubt. It is, what do you fix if you're the Chiefs, right? Like, are the problems they've had fixable on a bye week? You mentioned it. It's not really about, fixing the injuries or anything like that when it comes to this team. They've had shoot yourself in the foot mistakes, credit the defense, or inability, let's put it, I know Jeff, a defensive guy, would prefer to say an inability to either catch the ball under duress, as we've talked about all those catchable balls that have turned into interceptions, and maybe an inability to diagnose what the defense is doing or be patient and take advantage of what's there. And the defenses have been able to get them more this year than in past, although I did see a stat tonight that their efficiency is actually up there where it's been, in years past. So is it as simple as, what about the bye week solves the turnover dilemma, Jeff?
I think it's less about X's and O's, and it's more about just recognition of who you're working with. I think the smartest teams, the best teams, adjust to what they have on their roster. And so it feels like the first, whatever it's been, 11 games of the season for the Chiefs, there's been a lot of conflict and on both sides of the football, to be honest with you, on who they have and what they should be doing with that. And so I think that on offense, it's been about, well, how can we keep playing early on? How can we keep playing the way we've been playing? Well, when you're relying more on Byron Pringle, more on Demarcus Robinson, more on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's harder to do that. I think we've all realized the importance of Sammy Watkins. No matter how available he was when he was here, he had a huge impact on this offense. And so now they're starting to realize what they can do with these people. And maybe it does mean running the football more behind an offensive line that's built more to run. Maybe it's having Mahomes throw more passes into the flat and underneath instead of always looking for the deep ball when he has an opportunity to throw it. Those kind of things matter more because that's not going to change. You're still going to walk out there with the same players you've been playing with for the entire first 11 weeks of the season. And so how you use those guys, I think, will determine more about what they become moving forward on offense than anything else.
Yeah, I think, and I think you can appreciate this, Petro, as a gambler, as well as me. I think like when you get done with, like, you play blackjack, right, and you have a couple weird hands, and maybe you split eights when you shouldn't have, or you make a double down that's maybe a little dubious, and you get lucky, right? I think a smart, self-aware person gets up from the table and says, okay, I got kind of lucky. I'm fortunate to be where I am. I'm going to shape up a little bit, and I'm going to be more sound, or I'm going to, I'm not going to gamble as much, or I'm not going to do this, that, and the other thing. And I think the great thing is like learning from mistakes and learning from good luck is actually like something that I think a veteran team like Andy Reid, Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, like, I think when you look at this, and that, it's sort of the same thing as what happened in 19. Like, Pat takes a quarterback sneak, and we're all talking about him being out for the season at that moment, and he's out for 2 games. They get lucky. He comes back. They sputter for a little bit, but then they build on that good luck, right? They start to become fundamentally good, and I think at 7-4 and in first place in the AFC West, I think the Chiefs probably feel extremely fortunate right now. And given how they played and how poorly they played against teams like, Los Angeles Chargers and Buffalo Bills and so on, and Tennessee Titans. And to me, I think like that's maybe one of the issues is like, look, you guys have been playing too loosey-goosey with the ball. You've played that way for 3 years, frankly, right? And the fact that only half your interceptable balls got picked off in your 2 Super Bowl years, and this year they came back to roost a little bit, but you're still in first place in the AFC West. Take advantage of this, as opposed to using it as hey, here's the reason why our season sucked. You still get to write the chapter of this season, right? Like, I think that's the promise of this bye week.
I think there's promise in that. I think that is the positive side to it. That's the glass half full. I think there is a glass half empty that with 2 consecutive AFC championships and now finding yourself in 7-4, there's that, we got this. We're good. See, we told you. I mean, that's what I would guard against if I were a coach, that mindset of, yeah, we're down, we're dead. We're sitting here right there looking at the top, and we got this. I do worry a little.
Don't you think getting killed in the Super Bowl, though?
I hope, but
that's a long time ago.
Yeah. And to quote Jeff, every season is kind of its own creation, certainly influenced by their past. But I don't know that getting your ass kicked in the Super Bowl influences you any more than being 14-1 in the games you tried, 2 good playoff wins, and a Super Bowl championship the year before. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to get, high on your own, performance there, and maybe, go a little haywire. I also hope that they're better at assessing where they got lucky and don't come to the conclusion that they shouldn't split eights. It's clear that you're a sports bettor and not a blackjack player, because you always split eights.
No, Petro. No. You hit on 16 against the face card.
Okay.
Splitting 8s against the 10 is a sucker play.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'm old school.
Lose 1 hand, don't lose 2.
Maybe I'm old school. It's more likely that it's not a 10 or 11 on the underside of that 10, so I would split them. We could talk the math about that at another time. And maybe you smart young math guys have proven us old farts that have been looking at a chart for 40 years wrong. So I'll certainly listen to any advice you've got. Who finishes strong coming out of this bye week? Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I put up a poll on my Twitter account. You can follow me at Soren Petro. You can follow Eric at PFF_Eric. You can follow Jeff at Jeffrey Chadiha. I put up a Twitter poll about what the expectation is. They've got 6 games left, right? And Clyde Edwards-Helaire has played 6 games, right, because of the injury. So it's exactly splitting his season in half. So what do you think the poll is on the fans' expectation as to whether or not his numbers will be better or worse? Same number of games left, but no guarantee that he plays 6, right? He's only played 6 of 11 at this point. What do you think the return was, Jeff, on the fans and their expectation of whether or not he plays better?
I would guess the optimism is pretty high given what they've been doing, and he's come back healthy, and they've been running the football more. I would guess people were higher on him doing better.
You want to take a shot at the percentage? You're correct.
Okay. Man. 70%. So he'll do better.
80-20 think
Wow.
he's going to be better. And if you were to relate that and say, okay, well, if 80% thinks he's going to be better, then this should be a no-brainer, right? Like, and I don't know that it is the emergence of Darrell Williams. And listen, it's not about getting Clyde Edwards-Helaire the running back of the year award. It's about winning a championship. But I do think a good season, a good finish to the season by Clyde Edwards-Helaire will help contribute to it, particularly in the passing game. Any reason to believe the bye week jumpstarts Clyde Edwards-Helaire to a strong finish in your mind?
Well, I know he's the hill you're going to die on when it comes to this team. I think you're the only guy out here who really pushes for Clyde Edwards-Helaire or waves the flag for him. I'm going to be optimistic about it because I've been really down on him. Looking back on, I've probably been more pessimistic than I should be. I think he's the wild card in their offensive success moving forward. I really believe if he is a bigger factor, their offense becomes a lot better. Even maybe not to the extent of what they were doing with Jamal Charles back in the day when he was their only really significant offensive weapon, but something close to what they were doing with Jamal Charles with the screen game, getting him out in pass patterns. I really think that's where he can be most viable. And it is frustrating and almost mystifying as to why they haven't been able to do more of that. I suspect it's because there's a pecking order. And Eric can speak to this as a wide receiver. You got to take care of those guys who catch the football and make them feel good. So they do a lot of things that they have a lot of players who they got to make feel good on offense. Tyreek Hill not getting the deep ball. How can we get him more touches? Travis Kelce, he wants his touches. Mecole Hardman, even though he's not going to end up being a successful every down receiver, it may not be on this team in a couple of years, they got to find a way to get him his jet sweeps and all the other stuff. And so you start going down the list, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably fourth and fifth on the guy who gets to touch the football. If they raise him up to second or third, I think you might see a lot more efficient offense being played. And that may just happen because I think they have to do it.
Yeah. Eric, is there any reason to think that he's going to have a big finish and that it will suddenly click? And is it necessary?
I think it's necessary for some running back to play well on the team. Like I think you always have these, I joke because I talk about like Chiefs legend Sammy Watkins and Chiefs legend Damian Williams. But like fact of the matter is Damian Williams played fantastic football in week 17 against the Chargers. He played fantastic against Houston. He played wonderfully against Tennessee. And then in the Super Bowl, he probably could have been MVP of that game, right? Like if you bet on him at 25-1 to be MVP and you didn't get that ticket, like you should be pissed off because he was fantastic in that game. And he was great in the playoffs in 18. And they need a back to step up. I don't necessarily my worldview is I don't necessarily care who it is. But Clyde is the best of them, like the most talented of all of them. So he should be the one. I agree with Jeff. It's got to be one of those where like the hardest part about running backs is there are clearly guys like Adrian Peterson was this way when I was growing up in Minnesota, where like if you don't give him 20 touches, he's not all that effective. Right. And like in this offense, you have to be sort of more of a Damian Williams type where like if you get 7 carries and 7 catches, those 14 touches, you'll be okay with those, right? Like you can't, and that's like to Jeff's point where like a lot of these guys need, like Randy Moss was this way, where if you didn't involve him in the offense in the first quarter of the game, like he would check out sometimes, and that you can't have that. And that was always the benefit of Sammy Watkins, which was he would disappear for 3 quarters and he'd break your back. And so I do think that he will have a good second half of the year because I do have faith that Kansas City will look at the data and say, we got to stop running so many RPOs and so many lateral plays. And we have to get this little quick running back through the hole quickly. And we need to get our offensive line. One of the strengths of the team. Like, I think we don't talk about this enough, but the offensive line is one of the strengths of the team. We need to get that offensive line moving forward. And we need to get that offensive line like they were in the Raiders game, where they're 3-4 yards downfield plowing over linebackers, right? And they got away from that against Dallas.
Call hardball.
Yeah, exactly. And And if they do that, I think Clyde will have a fantastic second half of the year. And I think that's within the reasonable outcomes. I still wish he was a better receiver, though.
Yeah, I think somebody's got to be a good receiver. We saw Darrell Williams against the Raiders, 8 for 8, 91 yard, whatever the numbers were. They're going to, because Damian Williams was that guy out of the backfield. And
yes.
I think someone, somehow, some way, whether it's CEH or Darrell Williams, has got to be that guy. I think the screen game, I think T-Lat, who's watching us on Twitch, put up on the comment that, getting him going in the screen game. I think that's vital, because I think there are big plays and easy yards and a chance for that offensive line to punish some people down the field. Like you said, Jeff, Jim Harbaugh style, and just to get them having fun. I mean, I think Andy Reid, maybe to a fault sometimes with some of his trick plays that put the ball in harm's way, but I think he understands that you have to make the game fun. And I think screenplays for offensive linemen, getting a chance, particularly young guys that still have legs, getting a chance to get out in space and crush some people makes the game fun and gets them going. So I do think that they've got to get more from the running backs. I mean, we don't have to make it about my guy CEH, but more from the running backs and more from them in the passing game. Whether that's Patrick Mahomes throwing it to him more, Andy Reid calling the number more, whatever it is, I think it's got to happen for them to win a championship.
Well, and don't you think that the offensive line for the Chiefs, and historically the last in the Mahomes era, was made more of a finesse group than this one, right? When you're looking at Austin Ryder was not a big center. He was a kind of a get in the way center. Mitchell Schwartz was one of the best pass blocking right tackles in team history, league history. He pitched a shutout in the playoffs in 19. But he wasn't like a road grader, right? The way that some of these other guys were. Eric Fisher was much more of a finesse left tackle. And, that offense was designed that way, right? That was probably fine for that offense to sort of be more of a left-right offense, east-west, as opposed to north-south. And maybe it's taken Andy a little bit of time to realize that that's the strength of this front, because that's how they have to play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's good. I'm actually making a note, for something to ask Andy Reid in his press conference tomorrow about playing more of the power game. And I think it's something, has it been a learning process for him? Is he caught up now to what it is he's got and how he calls the game? I mentioned T-Lad. He also asked the question, and we had this on the board for one of our topics about, is Josh Gordon washed up? I said, listen, I don't want to be, taking calls 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in on Josh Gordon. What's the deal? Why? I said, 7 weeks in, fire me up. Let's go. 7-8 weeks in, when the guys have what would be the equivalent of a training camp, and we can talk about Josh Gordon. They're giving him snaps. We're not seeing production. Jeff, is he done? And they're wasting their time throwing snaps at him, or is there an ulterior motive that will be productive for this team, big picture?
I think they're wasting their time. I think and part of this is just because, look, if they had signed him and just worked him into the offense, and we hadn't heard these stories about how great he's looking. Granted, this was coming from anonymous sources within the building, but how great he was looking and how fast he was playing and just how ready he was to be out there, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But they oversold him to the public, got him, hyper speed ready to get on the field. And for the last, has it been 4 or 5 games now that he's played? He came in with Buffalo. Is that the week he showed up?
I think
Buffalo, they fell to, 2-3 against Buffalo. So he missed the first 4 games. So he's played 7.
So he's played 7 games. Yeah. So this is that time
Plus
to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so look, he's 30 years old. He hadn't played football in 2 years. We all know the story about him. I just don't think he's, Eric just mentioned it. There's certain guys you got to tee him up. You got to feed him the ball to get him going. And he may be in that category now as a player who, again, it's such a very fine-tuned niche. You're asking a player in that position, that second wide receiver, third wide receiver, third or fourth option to play. And if you're running an offense where the quarterback is going off script and he's doing a lot of different things, and you got to find a way to vibe with him, it's just hard to do. Maybe it's as simple as throw him a hitch or throw him a quick slant. Throw him something simple, get the ball in his hands, let him run. But it just seems like they're trying to get him into the flow of the offense, and the flow of the offense isn't built around getting him the football. And so, I wouldn't say he's washed it because of his physical skills. I just think it's not a great fit for him in this offense.
Yeah. Do you think though that I'd have more issues if they have targeted him 20 times and he's got like 2 catches. I mean, they've targeted him 5 times, right? No. So like the thing that Watkins always brought to the Chiefs was a good attitude. Like, this sounds silly, but like Sammy would play a whole game and not get that many targets, and you never heard a peep from him, right? Like, and what was always so valuable about him was when the other team decided that they were going to overcommit to Kelsey and Hill, right? Like Tennessee in 19, and he could dagger them. Or even better, when Hill got injured against Jacksonville, he can go for 203 touchdowns, right? Like, he had that ability, but he wasn't somebody who he wasn't like Odell, right? He wasn't like a malcontent when the offense moved away from him in certain circumstances. Like, Gordon right now is not a malcontent on this team. He's not pouting around. He's just not earning targets. And at some level, though, if he's running off the defense, if he's causing safeties to respect, him down the field and stuff like that, then he's doing half his job. And to Soren's point, if he comes out of the bye and he starts catching he starts getting open a little bit more and commanding a few more targets, then I think it's all good. Like, I never had designs for him to have like 700, 800 yards. I did.
I don't know about 700. I think I prorated it out and I had him at like 40 a game playing in like 10 games. Now, maybe I had him more, maybe like 50, because 60, the old days, 62 and a half was 1,000. I said, well, I don't think he's going to be on that pace. So I think I had him for an 800-yard pace. I didn't think they'd play him as soon as they did. So I think I had him for like 600 yards. Yeah, I did. I had big expectations. I won't run from it. I mean, I think the guy, I felt like he was an athletic freak that should be able to knock the rust off and then get out there, and you should be able to post him up. I mean, listen, he's not Mike Evans, but like, where's a curl in the end zone and him catching the ball out here with the DB?
But have they ever but that's just not the way the Chiefs operate their offense. They've never had.
Well, that's a weakness, though.
I agree. I agree, but like we're talking about like changing quite a few of Andy Reid's stripes this year, and I think wait
a minute, but I don't want to move off that point, Eric, because then this is a fundamental flaw in what Andy Reid is doing, because if you go sign Josh Gordon, you call Josh Gordon plays, right? And I see him. They signed Josh Gordon and then are calling, Deshaun Jackson plays.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think they should have just signed Deshaun Jackson and been like, look, this is the thing.
These are the guys we like. This is who we're signing.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, because they tried the Kelvin Benjamin in 18, right? And he was a programmatic non-fit, to quote Brad Childress. Then they tried. They tried all the big athletic tight ends, right? And those guys just have never, like, Pat's never been a back shoulder fade guy. They tried Cornell Powell, right? They like my big question for Josh Gordon, and I have to go actually and watch some film here because I think that this is the only way to answer this. Does Josh Gordon command the respect of the safeties more than McCole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson do, or Byron Pringle? Because if that's the case, then I think he's a net positive, because my fear is that defenses just simply don't respect McCole Hardman going on vertical routes. And if that's the case, then like, if they do respect Josh Gordon, then that's half the battle.
I listen, they list him at 6'2" or 6'3", 225 pounds. I believe he's every ounce of 225, if not more. You tell me, and I don't know that I buy whatever they list Noah Gray at. What route is Noah Gray running from whatever position on the football field that Josh Gordon wouldn't be more effective, Jeff?
Well, yeah, well, I think for me, a great comparison is what Tampa Bay did with Antonio Brown when he showed up midway through last year, which was he wound up with like 40-some catches, right, for 500 yards in like 8 games, something like that. And they were clearly running plays to set him up. And they still had Chris Godwin, they still had Mike Evans, they still had Cameron Brate and Gronkowski, but they found a way to get him involved, and he became an X factor in their offense. And so Eric's right. They don't run their offense that way. But part of the problem is that the tight end is doing whatever he wants in the middle of the field to get open, and there's only so much space to work within. At some point, it gets crowded out there, and you can't. And if you're someone like Josh Gordon, you can't be in the intermediate space. You're not running deep. Like, where are you supposed to go to catch a pass?
Well,
that's what it feels like. It's too congested for him right now.
I think that this is probably the here's the question I have, which I think maybe trumps this entire thing is, what if it just ends up being Byron Pringle?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think there are people in the building who believe Byron Pringle should start. And I think that coming out of we've seen this team already, where the front office wanted Thornhill, the coaches wanted Sorensen, the coaches wanted Hitchens, the people who draft and develop wanted the younger linebackers. Eventually the better players won out, right? I think at this point, and Byron Pringle has proven to be the most effective of those secondary receivers, right? If we come out of the bye and Byron Pringle plays 55 snaps and he plays well, he catches 4 balls for 60 yards and the offense hums, and that's the approach they take the rest of the year, and Josh Gordon plays 20 snaps and catches a ball a game, and McCole Hardman does the jet stuff, does that get us there?
I mean, yes. Listen, winning is what gets you there.
Yeah.
But I'll say this: to Jeff's point about Travis Kelce, kind of having the whole middle of the field, and kind of you put it as does what he wants, right? I would call them option routes. Maybe it is just like, hey, it's pickup football. Go sit down in the zone, go find the spot, and paddle zing one in there. Okay, but when Travis Kelce sits down, which he's not playing 100% of the snaps, then at that point there should be some structure. Or am I know that there's only so many reps. I know the one thing that as fans and even, those of us that I think try really hard to understand what's going on through the media as media members and talking to the guys, I do understand much more so in college, but even in the pros, there's a limit on reps. There's a limit on how much time. You can't be all things. There's a reason why teams don't run the wishbone when they want to run and then turn around. You can't be all things all the time. You got to pick what you can do and do it well. But it seems to me that they ought to be able to structure a slant for Josh Gordon. Travis Kelce goes out. Okay, Josh Gordon, you're running a slant to that part of the field. Or I honestly, how much difference do you think there is weight-wise between Josh Gordon and Travis Kelce? And how
much? They weigh the same exact amount.
And how much does Travis Kelce actually line up next to a tackle? I mean, how about when Kelce goes out, Gordon comes in? I mean, you don't have to call him a tight end. Call him a wide. I don't care, but this doesn't seem to be. This is baffling to me how complicated it's been, and that's why I'm willing to say Jeff's right. He's just done. He's cooked. Or Andy Reid has got a tremendous blind spot on how to use an athlete, and I kind of find that hard to believe, right?
I agree with you. That formation they love to run is that 3 wides to one side of the field and Kelce to the other side. They could easily put Josh Gordon where Kelce's at and let him work. If he can work,
he's not
then it works.
Buddy. So what the hell? Anyway, all right, let's move on. Defense, does it continue to play well, Jeff?
Oh man, you come right to me.
Yeah, well, you're
against the Broncos. Yeah, guess what? They're going to see a horrible offense. I'm betting on them this week. They're expect it 5 for 5. Let's keep the train moving.
6 weeks.
What's it? Yeah, I think they're going to. This is the perfect coming up. The Denver Broncos with Teddy Bridgewater. Really, they have a lot of offensive talent. But they don't use it well, and you're seeing who's the OC over there? Shermer? Is it Pat Shermer? The OC over there? I think it's pretty much the old Giants coach, Pat Shermer, right?
Yeah.
And so they're just hard to watch offensively. I mean, they're really boring. They run the ball well. I mean, that's the one thing you want to see is they're going to come in here and pound it. Melvin Gordon's banged up, but Javonte Williams, their running back's really good. So I think that will be the challenge. But I think at the end of the day, as I said when they played the Cowboys, I'm not going to hold it against them that they're playing against teams that are beat up and banged up on offense. I mean, they're playing who's in front of them. And as long as you're holding those teams, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do against those teams, I'm willing to say they can keep doing that. Now, I do believe there's going to be some tough games in there. I think the Chargers are a tough matchup for them. I think the Bengals potentially could be a really tough matchup if Joe Mixon's running the ball the way he's been running it and Jamar Chase gets it going again. But I don't see a lot of teams, and the Raiders with Deshaun Jackson. Those are the 3 teams that could give them problems offensively. Everybody else they're going to see is not going to be creating that many problems for them. So I think they'll play better.
Okay. By the way, number 20 offense, the Broncos versus what about the 20th 22nd, 23rd defense.
There
So
you go.
theoretically, the Broncos statistically over the course of the whole year are still the better unit when those two sides are on the ball. The Chiefs are moving up. They're tied for 13th in points allowed now. Can see the top 10. They I think, can crack the top 10. It won't even take that much for them to crack the top 10 after this week. And they need a good performance. But, I mean, how many teams they have to pass? It's very possible that they could do it. Do you have faith that the defense continues to play at a high level, Eric?
Yeah. You look at their remaining schedule. You have 2 Teddy Bridgewaters. You have Big Ben Roethlisberger, or I like to call him Has Ben Roethlisberger. you have, so that gets you to 3 games. You have Joe Burrow represent a challenge, although Joe Lombardi, I'm sorry. Like, we talk about rivalry week in college football, and I know Michigan beating Ohio State was the biggest rivalry triumph. But Joe Lombardi beating his own quarterback against Denver was the second best rivalry win against Denver. So you have that. Joe Burrow, the Bengals will present them a challenge, although they're a team that's I'm not worried about them. Like, you look at that schedule, and there's not a team that's going to come out and fillet Kansas City, right? You also Derek Carr as well on the schedule. So there aren't Brady's, there aren't even Josh Allen's on that schedule. So I think they're going to finish the year with pretty high marks as far as points against, yards per play against. I know they're currently last in yards per play against, but that shows you sort of how weird that statistic is as an efficiency stat. Denver, who everybody believes has a great defense, I believe is 21st or something in that statistic as well. So, but yeah, I think they'll do great. And I think it's the same thing as 19, right? Where, in 19 they had a bad New England offense. They had a few games. They had a Broncos game. They had an Oakland game. They had 2 Chargers games, and everybody, going into the playoffs, were all like, "Oh, they played great." What were they last that year? 7th in scoring defense or something.
Yeah.
And the question we all had was, well, what happens when they go up against a great offense? And I think anybody who's played the game knows that confidence is a big thing, right? And if players aren't going to be like, "Oh, I wonder what that DVOA was when we beat them senseless that game." No one cares. And so I think they'll go into the playoffs hot on defense, especially if they get out without an injury.
Yeah, I expect the defense to play better. I'm a little more optimistic than Jeff is. 22.7 points allowed. This is to my point. If we're to say, you got to get into the top 10. Well, they're tied with the Cowboys at 22.7, 22.6 for the Saints, 22.5 for the 49ers, 22.3 for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, they are right there. And then, by the way, the team right in front of them is the Baltimore Ravens at 21.8, and the Ravens are considered, a really good defensive team, and they're sitting there. I think it's at number 9, so they're not that far away from being there with the team that everyone thinks is a ground and pound and defense team in the Baltimore Ravens. They're spitting distance away in points allowed from the Ravens.
Yeah, the Ravens defense has been pretty below average this year. I mean, if you look at their numbers, they've had some tough games, but they give them a lot of points. I don't know if that's a great comp, but I hear what you're saying, that they are. Look, a month ago, we were talking about this defense setting records for worst ever and all sorts of stats. So to be where they are now is Steve Spagnuolo deserves a ton of credit for what he's done and for getting the right people on the field. The point I made a while back about the offense playing to his strengths, playing to his personnel, this defense is doing that. They're taking advantage of what they have to work with. They do have confidence. They believe they can get stops. The biggest thing they did was moving Chris Jones back inside. But I still think that this year has taught me a lot about just not making grand proclamations about what people are now. The minute you start doing that is when you start watching what's happening to the Rams, what's happening to the Bills, what's happening to the Titans. You go all around the league and you're going to see horror stories with teams that were playing well and then dropped, and teams that have been playing poorly and then risen up. And so I imagine all these teams at the end of the day are going to end up around 11-6, 10-7, 9-8. I mean, the Miami Dolphins were 1-7, and they might be in the playoffs. 1-7. That just speaks to where this league is at right now. So I think this defense deserves all the credit for what they've been doing, but I certainly feel like there could be some stinkers still coming just because of the way the league has gone this year.
Yeah, you think about Brian Flores, right? He goes from being Coach of the Year candidate to on the hot seat, about to be fired, to 4-game win streak. Like, again, I think, we all joked about like the Kansas City Chiefs power rankings, right? Like with PFF. And like, I think like the biggest, now I think now that we're all agreeing that it's somewhat reasonable to have them somewhere near the top. I think that the big thing that Jeff just said is true. It's like nothing changes that much based on one game, and
right.
Nothing changes that much based upon a game or two. And, ultimately when you look at the Super Bowl favorites right now, it's Tampa Bay, Kansas City, Buffalo. It's the exact same as it was last week, and it's the exact same as it was when we started the season. And even then with those, they're not huge favorites. They're just the best of a mediocre bunch of the league, right? And like it's to what Jeff is saying. Everybody's going to kind of be in that 11 win range.
And in some ways, it's the season's a roller coaster, but you still end up back in the starting house, right? Like, I mean, if we come around and we're like, oh, what the hell's wrong with the Bills? What's wrong with the Chiefs? Man, the Bucs look old, whatever, and you come back around and they're still the top dogs, then yes, it's just that the journey has some curves in it and some hills. But at the end of the day, the best are the best. We'll see if it does end up that way. Last week in the AFC West, Chiefs didn't play, obviously. The Broncos took down the Chargers with about 100 yards passing from their quarterback. The Raiders handled the Cowboys. What's the takeaway now on how the AFC West? You can't get one of the top 4 seeds without winning your division. Those are the teams the Chiefs have to get by. What's your takeaway from what we saw in the AFC West last week while the Chiefs were off? Yep.
I think it still comes down to this division is going to come down to the last week of the season. And as much as I just bash the Broncos, as much as I wonder what's happening with the Chargers, and the Raiders have been up and down, the Chiefs look great right now. I think all these teams are going to just knock heads until this thing comes to a close on week 17. And the most impressive win of the week was the Raiders, because it really sharpened the focus on what that Cowboys win meant to the Chiefs. So it was one or two ways to think about it. Either the Chiefs had a statement win and the Raiders got a statement win, or the Cowboys being banged up and having their issues meant a lot to both teams. End of the day, the Raiders are starting to look like the biggest challengers to the Chiefs now when it comes to the division, because having Deshaun Jackson is a big difference maker for that team, having that deep speed involved. I don't see the Broncos, again, being able to threaten the Chiefs. I think the Chargers could, if they got things figured out, but they're playing so poorly defensively against the run that you just don't – they're not a tough team right now. And so if you're going to have your star quarterback playing like an MVP one week and then not showing up the next week against contending teams, it's going to be a problem down the stretch. But again, all these teams have to play each other, and I can see the Chiefs running away with the division. I can see the Chiefs winning the division. I can see them finishing in second place just as easily.
But not third or fourth. You
not third or fourth. They'll be one of the top 2 teams.
One of the top 2. All right. Eric, are you there that you think it's going to be a dogfight to the end, or do you think the Chiefs separate? They've got a game lead right now, 2 more home games. We know what the schedule is. 3 weeks ago, the schedule looked like, God, what are we going to do? And now it looks like, hey, Pittsburgh blows. Cincy's up and down, although they look good the last time out. The Chargers look like they're kicking on water. Like, what do you think? You think it comes right down to the end?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, 2 weeks ago, the Raiders couldn't even beat the Bengals at home. They couldn't even get within 3 scores of them. And now, they're back, baby. And it's like, I just let the Raiders come to me if I'm the Chiefs, right? Like, I think they'll do, like, I think the Raiders will win 8 to 9 games. That'll get all my bets to the window, but it's not going to threaten the Chiefs for the division. I think the same way about the Chargers. And I know that we were all afraid of the Chargers because Staley was kind of woke on 4th down early in the season, and everybody loved it. But like Jeff highlighted something that was important. Everybody adjusted to Andy Reid's offense, right? And Brandon Staley was the toast of the town for his defense. And what do teams do to the Chargers now? They line up and they pound that defense into submission, because that defense is not used to having 7 or 8 men in the box and stopping the run. And their defense is bad. Like, they gave up 30-something points to the Steelers on that Sunday night game. And I know some of it was block punt, trickery and nonsense like that. But like when Big Ben's taking the lead on you in the 4th quarter, you're not good. And so like that's another team where it's just like, I just need to let this thing play out. Now, the issue with the Chargers, they do have the game advantage. The game on that Thursday night is going to be in LA. But I will say this, no home field advantage for the LA Chargers. Rookie head coaches on Thursday Night Football suck, right? And I know Staley's a genius, but he's a rookie head coach on Thursday Night Football, so that should be taken into consideration. And I agree. Like, I think Bridgewater is going to get Denver to 9 wins, and he's going to give them a chance to get to the playoffs. And I think that that's what he was for. Bridgewater was to keep Vic Fangio's job for one more year so he could get a quarterback like Watson or Rodgers or somebody like that. And Bridgewater's going to do that. They're not going to threaten the Chiefs doing that. So in my opinion, I do think the Chiefs have a buffer between them and everybody else, but there's the obvious leak of the Chargers having sort of the one game advantage on them.
I will say this, the one thing that jumps out about the schedules is that they're all got good teams on them, right? Like everybody's playing a good team, depending upon what you think of Cleveland right now, what you think of Washington right now. The Raiders have an at Cleveland. They have a home Washington and at Cleveland on there. For the most part, everybody has good, at least solid teams or better.
Yeah,
right?
It's not a Philadelphia Eagles schedule.
Right. But except for the Chargers, they have the last week schedule. They haven't consumed the Giants yet, which everybody else in the division has. So they've got the Giants at home in a couple of weeks.
Texans, correct.
And they've got a game against the Houston Texans. And I think if it is going to be a dogfight to the end, I think, Jeff, to Jeff's point, you're thinking Chiefs Chargers to the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where it may come from. Home game against the Chiefs. If they get that game, and the Chiefs have had their problems with a team, even though they've dominated the AFC West, the Chargers were that team that they just forgot to cover wideouts on 2-point conversions for whatever reason, right? Yeah. The Raiders were the team last year that even though they only had like 6 sacks all year, they beat the crap out of Patrick Mahomes in 2 games, and they had to come from behind to win one and got their ass kicked in the other one. Maybe that's going to be that scenario with the Chargers, and if that's the case, and they get that sweep, and then they handle business on those easier ones, then I think it could be a dogfight. I would tend to think that it's going to get away, but listen, I tend to have more homerism in me than most people do. So, all right, we're all in agreement. We've got the Chiefs. Eric and I were taking the Chiefs. Jeff's taking them first or second, right? But with a dogfight to the end. Who's the team to beat in the AFC, right? If it's the Chiefs, fine. But I'll say this: we were talking about the Patriots a little bit ago. Jeff, you said the one thing you learned about this season is that like it's going to change, right? Like as soon as you think you've got it all figured out, it's going to change. Talk to me in 26 days after the New England Patriots have played home and home with the Bills, with the at Colts stuck in the middle of it. Like, Eric and I brought this up on the radio show today. What do you think they're going to be? Right now, they're the toast of the town, sitting at 8-4. But what do they do after those next 3?
They probably go 2-1.
Okay.
I think so much depends on what Mac Jones is. And if he's really, I'm trying to make a comparison to Tom Brady as people have at this stage of his career. But if he is anything close to being special, he's got to make special plays in these kind of games. I think so far they've been able to create a nice little buffer around him with that defense and the special teams play and smart coaching. But they didn't beat Dallas. They didn't beat Tampa Bay. And he wasn't making big plays in those kind of games. I think this game against Buffalo this week is huge, both games, and the Colts for that reason, because he's going to have opportunities. More defenses are playing to put him in positions to try to do things against them. He did it last week. He did it the last 3 weeks, to be honest with you. With his numbers, I think he's been over 80% in 2 of his games completion percentage. So he's been performing at a high level. They're throwing the football more down the field. He's getting blitzed more, so he's making those plays. But yeah, I think the Patriots are easily the best team in the AFC right now, just because they've got the hottest winning streak. I think they're number 1 in scoring offensive scoring defense during that win streak of the last 6 weeks. And so they're playing at a really high level. And I said it back when the season started, that if Belichick, with all these defensive players he brought in, could really get those guys together quickly, it was going to be fun to watch. And you're seeing that now. I think what's underrated about that team, even though there was all this personnel turnover, is that they got a lot of guys who played in Super Bowls over there. A lot of guys who've been in big games over there, from Dante Hightower to Jalen Mills to Devin McCourty to Kyle Van Noy to, special teams guys, Slater, David Andrews on the offensive line, a couple of those offensive linemen. They got guys who played in a lot of big games. And so that helps you at this time of year. I think the narrative about them is that they just kind of had this team slapped together. I said back in the offseason, it was like Tampa got the band back together for Bruce Arians, and Bill Belichick was putting Earth, Wind, and Fire together. Everybody's on stage, with this group. But I think he's probably the coach of the year now for me. I know that's changed every week now, but the job he's done with that group and a rookie quarterback, it's hard to beat.
It took it a second to sink in, but the idea of Bill Belichick as Earth, Wind, and Fire, that's one that I'm going to enjoy here for a little while.
Yeah.
Eric, how about it? Pats are the flavor of the month nationally, and for good reason, for all the reasons Jeff just said. Bill Belichick's pedigree. Is it the Titans getting healthy, coming down the stretch, maybe getting Derrick Henry back sometime in January for the playoffs, getting A.J. Brown, Julio Jones out on the field? Are they the team to fear? Is it the Buffalo Bills, where I think you're going to go, that has the defense that seems to be the equal to the Patriots and has the quarterback that's more likely to get hot? Who is it?
Well, the team that currently has the 1 seed in the AFC is actually the Ravens. And I agree with Jeff, almost everything that Jeff said. You have Brandon Bolden, you just have guys in that locker room who are glue guys, and makes having the rookie quarterback there and all the new guys, the Hunter Henrys and the Jonnu Smiths and the Matthew Judons, all those guys immediately know what they're up against when they get in there. Look, I'm not going to dismiss anything the Pats have done. In fact, I've bet against them the last 2 weeks, and because I thought they were too high on the market. I've lost money betting them the last 2 weeks. And, I've actually bet them this week against the Bills. I think they were getting 3.5, now 3. So I'm finally on the right side, I think, there. But we're trying to predict who's going to be there at the end, right? And so historically, it's almost always like these teams that peak right now, they run out of gas. Because the reason they peak right now is they're healthy and, they're doing something innovative and all these things that sort of catch up to them. The league catches up to what they're doing. Rookie quarterbacks, they hit a wall. Why do they hit a wall? Because the league catches up to some of their stuff, injuries, that kind of thing, all sort of happen. And then to you guys, to your point, Soren, they play the 31st most difficult schedule coming in, right? When they started 2-4, both of those wins were against the Jets. When they started 3-4, it was like Houston and then 2 wins against the Jets. And so, they've had some impressive wins lately, but they gave up 100 yards rushing to 2 different running backs on Sunday for Tennessee.
I'll push back a little bit on the impressive wins of late. They've had one impressive win, and that was against the Titans, who were already we're already banged up. Like, we know when they play Kansas City, that was the theme here, was that I was picking the Chiefs to hang 40 on them because of all their injuries, and then they lost more of their offensive weapons.
Yeah.
There's 6. I will just say this. Their teams are better. The Browns are solid. The Panthers can play solid football. The Chargers are solid. I don't want to poo-poo and act like they're just beating Jets and Texans. Your point's right early. But the combined record right now of the 6 teams they've beaten in this 6-game win streak is 33-36.
Yeah.
So it's not, a murderer's row that they faced.
So yeah, and all that stuff, and then when they go, and I think the Colts, the Colts. I mean, this league would look a lot different if the Colts could have pulled that Monday night game off in Baltimore. If they could have hung on to a 2-touchdown lead against Tennessee and won in overtime in that game, and if they would have beaten a Tampa Bay team that they thoroughly outplayed if you take away the turnovers. And again, you can't take away the turnovers, but again, they were game on Sunday against Tampa. They're a good football team that should probably be 9-3, and instead they're 6-6. And I think they could be favored in that game against New England at home. And so, yeah, it's going to be rough there. When I think of Coach of the Year, though, I think of John Harbaugh. I mean, you look at that team, they don't have anybody. From 2 to 53, they're terrible. They got they got Justin Houston out there, and he's making plays. They got Tyus. Like you want to talk, and again, this is fan fiction for me or whatever. This is this is like candy to me. But they have Judon and Ngakoue, and they let Judon go to the Pats for $16 million a year. They let Ngakoue go to the Raiders for $13 million a year. They re-signed Tyus Bowser. When I look at his statistics on a play-for-play level, the same as those two guys, right? But he's playing fewer snaps. And he goes out there, he's covering dudes, he's leading the team in sacks. The Ravens just do it better than everybody else, on the margins. And obviously they don't have the quarterback that the Chiefs do or maybe the Buffalo Bills do. But they do it better than a lot of teams. And I think Harbaugh is that glue, man. When you look at that team, Peters gets injured in training camp. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins for a team that runs the football. They got rid of Orlando Brown, and then Ronnie Stanley gets injured. Like, so to me, I don't necessarily know if they're going to be the best team in the AFC, but they currently have the best record, and they have a tiebreaker over the Chiefs, and they're going to be pesky the rest of the way. So that's one team that we're never talking about, but I do think deserves our respect. I think ultimately the team, I think it's Kansas City. I'll say that. The markets think it's Kansas City. I think it's Kansas City, but the team that I think we're all sort of down on right now, we're on the down part of the roller coaster, and to take Jeff's advice, like kind of take the broader view. The team that we've been worried about all year, and the team we should be worried about despite losses to teams like Jacksonville and so on, is Buffalo. I do think Buffalo's there. The loss of Tre'Davious White hurts, and the inconsistency of Josh Allen's a big deal. But I think that they have the goods, and they also have a very, very good coach. I think the world of Sean McDermott and Les Frazier and Brian Dable.
Yeah, John Harbaugh, McDermott, Belichick. I mean, that is one of the things. Like, you have an off day, and it's going to be a bitch, right?
Yeah.
It's those guys can coach. But and likewise, all those teams are throwing in Andy Reid's name over on this side. I don't mean to make Chiefs fans think that I'm saying, oh God, they're Andy Reid's a knife and a gunfight. That's not the case. But he's not going up against punks. There are games that I've said, listen, Andy Reid plays chess. This guy plays checkers. It's a chess match when you go up against those guys. They're all good coaches. All right, let's finish with this. Can the Broncos? No, but the Chiefs are double-digit favorites. They're supposed to win this game. It will be a big problem, and we'll be back to saying, what the hell? The Kansas City Chiefs, if they don't beat the Broncos. Can they pull the upset? How does it happen if the Broncos do pull the upset, Jeff?
Running the football. They're playing fairly good defense. If you watched them over the last month or so, their defense has shown up. They obviously got some big plays from Patrick Surtain the second last week in that win. They're able to do something with that defense and running the football that most teams aren't doing right now. The problem is that the quarterback is mediocre. The game planning on offense isn't great, and they don't really make a lot of special plays in the passing game. And so they come in here and run the ball, control the clock for like 35, 40 minutes. They got a chance to win it if they're able to keep. I think Bridgewater's banged up too. Some kind of leg injury, didn't he? Coming out of that last game.
He finished the game the other day, but he was banged up. They were just sick and tired of watching Drew Lock play.
Yeah, that's right. Just get out there.
He's a Kansas City kid, but
and take the snap. We'll figure it out from there.
Yeah, they're not the Cardinals that they can actually say, sit down. We'll get by most of this, right?
Yeah. So no, I think the Chiefs win. I don't think the Broncos are going to be pulling upset, but if they do it, it's going to be playing ugly and winning ugly.
Okay, Eric, how's it look? First of all, you like the Chiefs to win the game. 10 we discussed on the radio show today is kind of a number where, to me, listen, I think you can take either side, and I'm not going to call you a moron for betting the game with a 10-point line, but just winning the game outright. The Chiefs are supposed to win. If they don't, what happened?
Noah Fant has a huge game. I think this team is not going to let Sutton, Judy, and Tim Patrick beat them. It's just not in the way they construct their defense, but they will funnel balls to Gordon and to Fant, and I think that's how they can be beat. And I think Fant's a talented enough tight end where that approach can backfire. I think it's obviously pressure. I think it's the Chiefs not having enough good wide receivers to challenge the Denver secondary, where you have Surtain and you have Ronald Darby, Bryce Callahan. You have Kyle Fuller, who's a good player, sitting on the bench for them. Justin Simmons is good. That they're good in the secondary, and so Pat not having anywhere to throw, Mahomes, and Reed being impatient and not running the ball when they can, because I don't think Denver's a great run defense. To me, the best bet to make in this game, I don't even want to bet this side. I'm going to bet under 47. The Chiefs are sneaky under. Their games have gone under against Washington. Their game went under against Tennessee, weirdly. It went under against New York. It went under the Green Bay game. It went over against the Raiders, but that was because they exploded, and then it went well under against Dallas. They've been playing these money games, and I think 47. I think this game is 23-13. I think that's probably And I think we're all kind of asking this question next week at this time, like, oh, did the Chiefs offense kind of figure it out? It's the same stuff, but I think that's how the game ends up. And, very similar to how they played in Arrowhead on Sunday Night Football last year. It was very like the Chiefs didn't cover a double-digit spread that game either, and it was sort of like, it was just kind of get out of Dodge with a W kind of game.
Yeah, 23-13. I think Chiefs fans would take it. Now at this point, they've learned to just enjoy the wins. Maybe there's been a reality check for the Chiefs. They need to win it, though. I will say this. If they don't, and my scenario is they continue to put the ball in harm's way. I mean, they did it against Dallas. They did it against the Raiders, and the Raiders just didn't make them pay. And we saw the Chargers put the ball in harm's way by not catching the football. It was a pick six going the other way. I mean, really, the Chargers, yardage-wise, played the better game. But they made the kind of mistakes that the Chiefs have, frankly, been making all season long. And I don't know how sitting around getting some rest and looking at some video is going to make the turnovers go away. So I am a little bit leery. I've seen enough of it to think that, to Jeff's point, this season has taken on its life, and the life is they can't value the football. But if there's a way that a bye week can do it, then I think the Chiefs are the team to beat, and I think they'll win this game. But I think it's turnovers against a talented defensive team if it does come that way. All right, guys, for Jeff Chadiha, NFL Network, NFL.com, check out his amazing work at those locations, Pro Football Focus. PFF.com is where you can find Eric Eager. You can catch me either live in Kansas City on 810 WHP or at 810WHP.com. Thank you for joining us on Red, Gold, and Bold. We're back at it with our Two Deep. You can follow it live, 9 p.m. on Thursday. We'll broadcast that one. You can catch us on the Twitch, the YouTube, the Twitter, and, of course, you can always catch us on the podcast as well. Thank you for joining us here on Red, Gold, and Bold.